My name is Emily Carson. I'm 26 years old, and for the past 4 years, I've lived in a windowless basement with peeling paint, a flickering bulb, and a boiler that hisses like it's angry I exist. I work 2 part-time jobs. Most nights I eat dinner cross-legged on the floor. And today I thought I was just attending another obligatory family brunch. I didn't expect my world to crack wide open over scrambled eggs and mimosas. We were at the Maple Room, that overpriced place my family loved, because the napkins were cloth and the butter was shaped like roses. My mother fussed with her coffee, my sister scrolled on her phone, and my father was deep in conversation with my uncle about property taxes. Then Grandma Margaret raised her glass. Her smile was wide, proud. To Emily, she said, "I'm so glad you're enjoying the apartment I got you. It warms my heart knowing you have a place of your own." I froze. I still remember the sound my mimosa made as I set it down, too hard, too fast. A few drops spilled. My throat tightened. I looked around. My mother blinked, confused. My sister actually looked up, and my dad, he dropped his fork. The clink of metal on porcelain was sharper than it should have been. My heart thudded so loudly I could feel it behind my eyes. I looked down at the cloth napkin in my lap, wiped my fingers slowly, deliberately, and said, "I live in a basement." Grandma's smile faltered. "What?" "I never got any apartment," I said, louder now, steadier. "Not from you, not from anyone." Silence fell over the table like a thundercloud. Even the waitress stopped mid-step. Grandma leaned forward. "What do you mean? I gave your father the down payment 4 years ago. He told me he surprised you with it after graduation." Every breath felt heavy now. My dad turned pale. My mother looked at him, eyes narrowing. "You said you helped her find a place downtown," she said, voice tight. "Dad," I said, locking eyes with him, "you told me I needed to work harder, that no one was going to hand me anything." He opened his mouth, then closed it. I kept going. "All this time, while I scrubbed floors and lived next to a laundry machine, you were sitting on money that wasn't yours." Gasps rippled around the table. I stood up. My hands were shaking, but I was done staying quiet. "We're here celebrating birthdays, right? Maybe it's time we all stop pretending." And then I walked out. The cold air outside hit me like a slap. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move. To breathe. To stop the burning in my chest before it spilled out of my eyes. Behind me, the restaurant door swung open. Footsteps. Then a voice I hadn't heard tremble in years. "Emily, wait." I turned. Grandma Margaret stood on the sidewalk, her coat slipping off one shoulder, eyes wide, face pale. "You never got it?" she asked. Her voice was almost a whisper. I shook my head. "I've been renting a basement from a chain-smoking landlord who doesn't believe in banks. The walls are stained yellow. My bed is 3 feet from a water heater." She blinked fast. Her hands clutched her purse like it was the only solid thing left. "I gave your father $70,000, she said quietly. "I trusted him. He said he was helping you start fresh." I laughed. "Not the funny kind, the kind that catches in your throat." "He told me to stop expecting handouts," I said. "That real adults make it on their own." She stepped closer. "I had no idea. I'm so sorry, honey." I nodded, but I couldn't speak. Then her voice changed. It grew firm, clear. "We're going to the bank tomorrow," she said. "And then we're going to talk to a lawyer. If it's as bad as it sounds and I believe you, then he didn't just lie to you. He stole from both of us." I didn't respond right away. I didn't trust my voice not to crack. So I nodded again, just once. And for the first time in years, I felt something shift. Someone believed me. Grandma placed her hand on my shoulder and gave it a gentle squeeze. "I'm not letting this go, Emily. Not now, not ever." That night, back in my basement, I stared at the cracked ceiling above my bed. The pipes moaned every time the upstairs neighbor flushed their toilet, but I didn't feel alone anymore. Because tomorrow something was going to change. Tomorrow, the truth was coming into the light. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a car idling outside my building. It was 8 a.m., sharp. Grandma was never late. I grabbed my coat, tied my hair into a low bun, and stepped out into the cold. Her silver sedan was parked by the curb, the passenger door already unlocked. She wore sunglasses and a long beige coat, the kind that looked expensive but never showy. We didn't speak much on the drive. but the silence wasn't awkward, it was purposeful, focused. We walked into the bank like we were about to take back something that never should have been lost. The banker was a woman in her 50s, composed and polite. She tapped at her keyboard for what felt like forever while Grandma explained the situation in calm, clipped tones. Then finally the screen flashed. "There it is," she said, pointing. "A wire transfer from Margaret Carson to Richard Carson. Marked as gift for Emily's condo. Dated 4 years ago. $70,000. I leaned in. My name wasn't anywhere on that account. "Was there a follow-up transfer?" Grandma asked, voice cool but tight. The woman clicked a few more times, her brow furrowed. Then she nodded slowly. "Yes. 5 days later, the full amount was moved to an investment account under Richard Carson's name. There's no indication it was used for property." I swallowed hard. Grandma's lips pressed together. "Can you print everything?" she asked. The banker nodded and stepped away. When we were alone again, Grandma turned to me. Her eyes didn't waver. "He took it. All of it." I nodded, my jaw clenched. "He didn't just lie to me," she said, her voice low now. "He lied to you, and he lied about you. He made me believe you were ungrateful. That you never even said thank you." My eyes stung, but I blinked the tears away. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I didn't know there was anything to be grateful for." The banker returned with a neat stack of papers. Grandma didn't even glance at them before sliding them into her purse. As we left the bank, the winter air felt different, crisper, sharper. We weren't just holding paper. We were holding proof. Grandma paused before opening the car door. "He stole from us," she said again. "And I've got one more thing planned." I raised an eyebrow. "We're paying your parents a visit this afternoon." She didn't smile. Neither did I. But inside, something quiet lit up. A fight I thought I had to wage alone wasn't mine to carry anymore. That afternoon we drove to the house I hadn't set foot in since I was 22. The house I once called home. Grandma parked at the curb like she owned the street. I followed her up the walkway, clutching my coat closed as the cold wind bit at my collar. She rang the doorbell with a confidence I hadn't seen in years. The door opened. My father, Richard, stood in the doorway, wearing an old fleece and an even older expression, half confused, half annoyed. He blinked at us both. What's this?" "We need to talk," Grandma said. Her tone left no room for negotiation. "I'm kind of busy." "Sit down, Richard," she said flatly. He stepped back without another word. We walked into the living room. The same photos were on the mantel. My childhood soccer trophy. A faded graduation picture of me that still sat in a cracked frame. My mother hovered in the kitchen, drying her hands with a dish towel. Her brows were drawn, sensing something was off. My sister peeked down from the upstairs landing. We all sat. Grandma placed a thick folder on the coffee table. She didn't even touch it, just stared at my father. "You told me Emily was living in the apartment I helped buy her," she said. "You said she was doing well, thriving." Richard crossed his arms. "She is doing fine. Why are we?" "No," she cut in. "She's been living in a basement for 4 years, working 2 jobs, while you took her money and called it responsibility." His face tightened. "I didn't take anything. It was for her future." "Don't lie again," I said, my voice quiet but cutting. "You told me I didn't deserve help, that I was entitled. Meanwhile, you were sitting on $70,000 meant for me." Silence stretched. Grandma reached into the folder, pulled out the printouts from the bank, and slid them across the table. "I've already spoken to my attorney," she said. "If I have to pursue legal action, I will. But this money will be paid back in full." My mother moved closer now, her voice a whisper. "Richard, please tell me this isn't true." He said nothing. He stared at the papers like they were written in a language he couldn't read. Grandma stood. "And one more thing," she added. "You're going to explain yourself in front of the family. This Sunday. No more secrets. No more pretending to be the father of the year." I looked at him one last time. The man who told me I'd never make it without him. And for the first time he looked small. Like a man who knew the walls were finally closing in. Sunday arrived like a storm you could see coming from miles away. Same restaurant, same table. But everything felt different. This time I wasn't tucked at the far end between the ice bucket and a chair that didn't match. I sat next to Grandma, right at the head of the table. Her hand rested lightly on mine. It was warm, steady. The family filed in slowly, sensing the tension before a single word was spoken. My mother looked exhausted. My sister wore oversized sunglasses indoors, pretending nothing mattered. Cousins whispered. My aunt glanced around, trying to smile, failing. Then my father walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usual confident swagger had withered. He didn't speak to anyone, didn't even nod. Just sat down and kept his eyes on the white tablecloth in front of him. Grandma stood before anyone could pretend this was normal. "I'll keep this short," she began. Her voice was clear, loud enough to hush the entire room. Even the server mid-pour froze, eyes wide. 4 years ago, she continued, I gave a gift to help my granddaughter start her adult life. I wired $70,000 to her father, trusting that he would use it as I instructed for Emily's apartment, a fresh beginning. She turned slightly, looked at me, and her voice softened. But she never received it, not a penny. While I believed she was living comfortably, building her future, she was scraping by in a basement, because the money disappeared. Murmurs rose like low thunder around the table. She didn't flinch. Richard, she said, turning to my father, stole that money, lied to me, lied to her, made her feel lazy and unworthy, all while padding his own investments with funds that were never his to begin with. He shifted in his seat, but said nothing. Then, with deliberate motion, Grandma reached into her coat and pulled out a folded letter. She laid it on the table in front of him. I want you to read this, she said. He stared at it, silent. Then slowly, his fingers unfolded the paper. His voice shook as he read aloud. To my family I stole from my daughter, Emily Carson. I took funds meant for her future and lied about their purpose. I have wronged her, my mother, and this family. I accept full responsibility and will repay the full amount within 6 months. I am deeply sorry. When he finished, there was no applause, no sympathy. Just silence. And for the first time, I looked at my father without fear or sadness. Just clarity. I wasn't invisible anymore. And the truth finally had a seat at the table. After brunch, Grandma and I didn't talk much on the drive home. There was nothing more to say, at least not about him. We pulled into her driveway just as the sky began to turn orange. She turned off the engine but didn't move. I still can't believe you never asked me for help, she said quietly. I looked at her, then out the window. I was done asking, I said. She nodded slowly. I should have checked sooner. I'm glad you didn't, I replied after a pause. Because now I know. I know who's actually in my corner. Her hand reached across the console and patted mine. You're not going back to that basement. I didn't respond, but the tears I'd held back all weekend suddenly stung the corners of my eyes. A few days later, we visited a small apartment in a quiet downtown street. The sun poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows. Light wood floors, real windows, a small balcony with flower boxes. I stood in the center of the room, stunned. This is yours, Grandma said softly. It looks like a magazine, I whispered. It looks like your life, she corrected. The one you're going to start living. And I did. That night, in my new space, I sat on a real bed, not a futon, not a mattress, next to a boiler, and opened my laptop. There was a folder I hadn't touched in years, hidden behind job applications and unpaid bills, labeled Designs. Inside were sketches I'd drawn in college, apartment layouts, color palettes, little furniture concepts I once dreamed would become my career. Before my father told me it was a waste of time. Before he said, it's cute, but when are you going to get serious? Now I was serious. I polished my portfolio, applied to design studios, set up a simple online site, sent out samples, proposals. I wasn't sure what would stick. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, an email landed in my inbox from a local architecture firm launching a new community housing project. They were looking for someone who could creatively utilize small spaces. I smiled. I've lived that, I told them in my interview. I wore the same beige coat my mother once called childish. They offered me the job on the spot. It wasn't just a job, it was validation. Proof that the girl in the basement hadn't been a failure. She'd just been underestimated. And she wasn't hiding anymore. She was finally building on her own terms. Months later, I hosted brunch. Not at a restaurant, not in someone else's house. Mine. The apartment was modest but filled with light and warmth, real dishes, fresh flowers, the smell of cinnamon rolls baking in the oven, music playing low from a Bluetooth speaker I bought with my first freelance paycheck. Grandma arrived first, of course. She brought sunflowers, my favorite, and placed them in the glass vase I'd bought with my own money. She looked around the space with a proud kind of quiet, the kind that doesn't need to say a word. My cousin Olivia, who once rolled her eyes whenever I talked about art, now leaned in to ask about color palettes and mood boards. My aunt complimented the way I arranged the open shelves in the kitchen. And I just smiled, because this wasn't just a meal. It was proof. Proof that the version of me they once ignored, doubted, pitied, that version had never been broken. Just buried. My father wasn't there. He hadn't come around since the day of the letter. He repaid the money, on time, exactly 6 months later, but the apologies stayed on paper. And that was fine with me. Because some absences feel more peaceful than any presents could ever offer. As I passed a tray of warm scones around the table, I caught Grandma watching me. Her eyes were soft, and her smile full of something deeper than pride, relief maybe, or love that had finally landed where it was always meant to. "This," she said gently, "this is what I imagined." I reached for her hand and gave it a little squeeze. Me too. We didn't need to say more. Because in that moment I wasn't surviving. I wasn't scraping by. I wasn't proving anything to anyone. I was simply living. And living well. Not because I got revenge, but because I found something better. A truth reclaimed. A future restored. And the peace of knowing that sometimes the best kind of justice isn't loud. It doesn't slam doors or shout from rooftops. It shows up quietly. With sunlight through clean windows. With laughter that doesn't feel forced. With a table you can finally call your own. Have you ever had to rebuild your life from scratch? Or discover something that changed everything you thought you knew? Let us know in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, like, share, and subscribe for more quiet victories and unapologetic truths.